Welcome, Sonya. We're so excited to have you.
Hello. I'm very excited to
Um,
be here.
so excited for your new book. And, we've never actually been in space together.
Exactly. So weird. We're gonna.
We're gonna, we were gonna,
We
before
were gonna.
everything shut down, we're going to be down in DC and do a workshop for us at the hospitals. Um, and of course, you did a workshop very recently for us that was extraordinary. And one of the things that's beautiful about this virtual time is that it brings people together from all different places, and that was really cool. um, I'm such a fan of your work, and also a fan of how you are in community. That's like sort of separately but probably related, right? Like the empathy that's required to do that is the same empathy that fuels the writing that you do. um, and you're really generous with the process with other people, with like what's happening and how it's happening. And that's not everybody is that way as a professional writer.
Well, I just remember so I think the thing that was really important for me was like after I got out of college, I decided like I'm not going to be a writer because there's no use and it won't be useful to the world. So I stopped writing, or like tried really hard to make myself stop writing, and I was going to go to social work. And so I did a bunch of other jobs and whatever, and then like, found myself writing poems. And I feel like I had to sort of cobble together my process based on, finding a bunch of writing guides and use bookstores after college. And so I think because I was always working other jobs and kind of cobbling bits of writing together, the thing that's really been important to me is to talk about, how you can do writing no matter what you do as a day job. And I think like one of the things that kind of freaks me out, I don't know why, but it's like the idea that people have to write all day, or you have to have 8 hours like
Mhm.
in order to produce. And I just feel like that separates so many people from like their ability to express themselves, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I'm just really I like to, in order to not freak myself out about what's required to write every day, I like am I like to talk about setting the bar super low and like showing up and doing like the worst job possible at the computer screen, because I feel like some days that counts as writing and that's totally okay. So yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot too. Like reading is writing too.
Yes.
Going for a walk is writing too. Good
Right.
conversation is writing too, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but when you grow up reading like Annie Dillard, who walks around the same pond every day and writes, and you're just like, damn it, what? You're supposed to chop wood? There's like, I don't
Right. Right. Or have like a cabin in the wood,
right.
right? Where
Borrow a
like
cabin. She's always talking about borrowing a cabin. And you're like, how do you know?
who do you know exactly? And then yeah, through years of, like I had my son when I was in grad school, there's just never time to like go away and do a writing residency or do A or B. And so, you know I've managed to get a lot of writing done, but it's always been in bits and pieces around everything else. So
Do you have any rituals that you do to drop yourself into that? I
have
find
like
my
lots of
rituals
coffee.
are more time, lots of coffee. Okay, fine, no complaints here for that advice. Um, but is there like a room that you sit in, or like is there a space where your writing mind shows up, or
It's well, like, right, our house is weird. Well, because I have like a teenage son who's often like he's been at home during the whole or a lot of the pandemic, and there's loud shouting and there's video games and whatnot. And so like for the pandemic, I've been writing in the kitchen, which is granted is like the not a great office space, but that's what it is. But and then right now I'm in our basement in a back hallway that we turned into an office. Anyway, I started when I started to let myself write again. I was living in Boston and I was writing on the way and back from work on the subway. And like and
Mm.
so I think for whatever reason, like I'm one of those people that can write like with noise around me. But I sometimes, like, if I'm really not feeling it this in a certain morning, sometimes I'll even like, I'll look at the clock and I'll be like, "Oh my god, I don't feel like this." And so, like, it'll be 7:55, and then I'll actually write 8:55 on, like, my legal pad and be like, "You can do this. You can show up for an hour," and then be like, "Oh, it's 7:56. Look at you. You're doing good."
I love that so much. Because I wrote, I feel like I wrote my whole first book on public transportation.
Really? Oh my god. Oh, I love that.
I had a document called Crying in Public Places.
Oh my god.
It's like me pouring it out on the bus. And I would take the bus to work because it was longer than the train ride.
Oh, wow.
And so I would purposely like put in this hour
That's awesome.
my day so that I could do this. And the key with the noise is that it was all noise that I was not responsible for.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Whereas at home,
Right, you have to be on alert, right?
it's like I'm gonna have to take care of whatever it is that's
Totally.
happened, right?
Totally, yes.
And that's tricky. But so finding new rituals, which is why I'm always asking this question, is like as circumstances change, although this is a big change, this
Yeah, totally. And
uh,
then the other thing that I do, um, is that I'm always, like, cheating on one big book with another fun book.
this
So
is an extraordinary thing. Yes, say more.
So it's what's sort of like not working about it is like I've had these series of big important books that like are not published, but then I keep publishing the little books.
So this memoir in a day is a little book then.
Yeah, it was something like I'm working on this huge book about like 4 centuries of like socioeconomic division in Connecticut for whatever reason, right? And then as a side project, I call it like a little recess book. So if I'm not feeling the big stuff or I'm just feeling lazy, I'll go in and I'll just play around with the small stuff. And that's how then Pain Woman was also a recess book.
Really.
Yeah.
And Pain Woman is so experimental and like
Yeah, because I was just
so
like, there are no rules for this one, so
yeah, I had a conversation with the poet Barvisha a couple of weeks ago, and she said something like, "Art does not move at the pace of capitalism."
oh, that's so good.
And I think of those recess books that you're, as you call
Ah,
them, as like they're outside of the productivity,
yeah.
and you get to discover things there without the pressure of capitalism.
Yeah, yeah, and then I get to feel like, "Oh, I'm kind of doing something bad," like I'm not and so this is like the space to not make sense, and that book I think was so fun for me, even though it was about chronic pain, because, I decided I was just gonna write for myself and other people with pain, and on purpose be as weird as possible, which I had never, like, felt like that had never been a goal of mine before. I feel like in past books, I've been like, "Okay, contain the weirdness, just contain it, just be sequential, please."
But pain, of course, isn't linear. And
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, totally. So, yeah, so having, like multiple projects or like multiple ideas for projects and then feeling like, okay, if I'm not feeling one, it's okay for a while or it's okay. Like I I can't remember, some famous person said like don't, like the writing advice was like don't start something until you finish something else. And I just feel like I can't make myself do that because I don't want the writing to feel like I'm forcing myself when my interest is elsewhere.
mhm.
So I'm sort of more interested in like how much excitement can I build up about a bunch of different things, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, that is the thing about art making and this line about being a professional artist, like,
Mhm.
um, is that like the point isn't to remove joy from the thing that you love
Right.
most.
Right. Yeah. Like
That's
that's your source, right? That's the source of like all the good stuff.
it's why you do the other jobs,
Yeah.
right? It's so that you can get into flow and enjoy this space. But also, I think again, like this productivity mindset, I can feel sometimes like really guilty for how much I love it. And I'm like, well, this can't be worth something if I love it so much.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Right now,
Totally.
I'm
Either one or the other, right? Yeah, totally.
I'm researching for this collection of essays that I'm working on. Uh,
Yay!
I'm so excited about it, and my research is rewatching Bollywood movies from the 80s and 90s that were formative for me, and it's my sister called me the other day, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm watching," I named the film, I think it was Chandni, and she was like, what?" I was like, "It's research." She's like, "Oh my god, your job is watching that movie?"
You're
And
like, it's much.
it was so validating to hear my
Oh,
sister
it's
say,
so
"Your
awesome.
job is that," and I was like, "What it is."
And how great that you've created this as your job.
Um, but of course, like there are the fun parts of it, and then there's, where
Right,
topics are difficult, right?
right,
So
right. Including the like going back to it and being like, okay, like that was a nice try. And oh my God, does it have to be completely taken apart now? Or what were you thinking? Or
yes. And do you reach a place sometimes in that process where you're like, I can't? Is
oh,
it when you move to the other project for a little bit?
yeah, or I just, especially I think with a long project like this thing that I'm working on now, this book about Connecticut. I mean, it's been like 7 years of my life and a lot of time. And so it's kind of like in some ways, you wake up, it's like, am I in a bad marriage with this really this book that I've put so much time in? Do I need to like take it out in the back pasture and like put it to rest or something? And then, usually like that's a sign like for me that I need to walk away from it. Because also I think then I'm not seeing clearly like the potential in the book. I'm kind of hating on it. And I've done that before. Like I've revised books with hate and
Hmm.
like sort of cut something out of them. Do you know what I mean? That
I
then
do.
like it was a bad revision and I did something wrong to the project?
Yeah, you took out some kind of like load bearing wall that you
Yeah.
didn't even realize was a load bearing
Right.
wall. It just made you
Right. Or like the joy bearing wall?
a bearing wall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and that's the magic that we know by its absence.
Right. Right. Right.
As you're it's this is and this is what makes writing and art making be continuously interesting, is that you
Mhm.
don't quite know every single project you're feeling your way through.
Yeah.
Um, and God, it's frustrating.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and especially because sometimes, right, it's hard to distinguish as you're doing it between like, okay, I'm really pursuing something interesting and pushing myself versus I'm like I'm I've got too much aggression toward this thing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like that is such like a
Yeah.
fine line. So I often have to like, I mean, I've broken stuff and then remade it later. And like, okay, so here's a cool process thing that I'm just starting to realize now, like with this big book that I need to do and that really helps me. And as a visual artist, you will get this. I started to do a lot more. I wish I had one down here. Like these sort of bubble charts that are kind of outlines, but instead of like sequential, I'll put like, okay, so I'll have like this nightmare of a chapter that I can't figure out. Like, what is going on here? There's too much information.
Mm.
And so I'll just take out a piece of paper and I'll put like concepts in bubbles or like people.
Yeah.
And then like sort of like circle and connect them and try and figure out, okay, what in here is the thing that I care about the most, right? Like what excites me and sparks this. And then like I'll circle that one and kind of try and figure out, like it ends up being this sort of visual map of like the emotional heat of a chapter.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I'm saving them now, but they've all really helped me to figure out like like it's weird to write a draft first and then kind of go back to a concept map or an outline and then figure out for revision, here's what it needs to look like, kind of.
No, I love that. So then, like, I need to turn up the volume on this one.
Yeah, exactly. And like maybe this is the thing that needs to lead it. And then so if this thing leads it, how do I put all the pieces around it to support that and make that the thread that comes through the whole thing? So yeah, I mean, that's been working at least for this big book.
Oh, that's beautiful. What a wonderful, wonderful way to go. Because you're like, then you're putting in the joy bearing wall, right? Like again and again
Yeah,
and
yeah.
again.
And like hoping that a reader will love this thing that I love about this particular piece of research or whatnot. And it was so great as I started recently doing this with my students, like just sort of talking about that process and then showing them examples. And then I had a student, so nice, message me this semester and say like, oh my God, this helped me so much. My grades have gotten so much better. I feel like I know how to think now. And I was like,
Know how to think is
yeah.
trying to teach all of it. I love
Totally. And I feel like I wish I would have figured this out about my own process earlier, but whatever, like I'm happy I have it now. So
Oh, well, thank you for sharing it with we're all going to be improved by it. I know I am already thinking like, oh, there's this one I'm struggling with that I'm going to do this with. So I love that. Um, this podcast and this collective of which you are a part is called United Against Silence. And, it's about how systems of abuse rely on our silence
It's awesome.
to maintain control.
Yeah.
And when we talk about these things that we're supposed to stay silent about, we kind of can crack that sort of
Yes.
the casing around us, around it.
Right.
Um, and of course, pain is something nobody wants to, it feels like it's unwelcome, right? Like nobody
Yeah.
wants to hear about your pain.
Right,
Um,
right.
how did you, like, I know it was a project here. And then there's this like imposed silence around the
Yeah.
experience of pain or disability or anything less than like the paragon of
Right.
you know
Or like recovering from something that has hurt
yeah,
you, right?
yeah, like, oh, I have all of the language of battling and defeating.
Yeah.
And then there is in memoir always the big who cares
Yeah.
that is always silent. That's our system of abuse that we, I think, put on ourselves, where it's just like always in the back of my mind, like, who even cares? Who cares what you went through or whatever it is, right? Which is not true because I'm reading books by people whose stories I do care about
Right, right, right.
all the time. How do you do? How has that shown up for you, and what have you done about it?
Oh my God, it's the biggest thing. It's the biggest thing. Oh my gosh. Well, and there's stuff, I feel like there are stories, like say family stories that require silence, that in some ways, like there's this paragraph that has actually birthed like several books that have been written on top of it, but then I always take the hard paragraph out. And I feel like this hard paragraph, there's a couple of them, just like bad things that have
Yeah,
happened that I can't quite write about and share publicly, but like that have I feel like I'm slowly writing my way into being comfortable about sharing them, but gosh, I feel like as a nonfiction writer, especially, I feel like I spend every single day being like, well, what are you actually afraid of? Like, what are you afraid of if you put this out into the world? And then trying to figure out, versus who besides me might be helped by it, and so like, I feel like the pain book was really good for me in that I just decided to set aside what I thought. like how much I thought I was going to bum people out,
Yes.
but I see that too with I mean, it's one of the gifts of teaching is that I see my students so often say the same thing, like, oh God, I'm sorry, this is going to bring you down. And people then are just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. Like, so almost like that paradox of like, oh, this is a sad story, but the fact that we're sharing it is a beautiful thing that brings us together in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I I'm trying more and more to just like really trust my experience, you know? And like you were saying too, think about it being something that, okay, if I've run into this my whole life, the likelihood is that other people have experienced it too,
Right.
right?
Just statistically, right? Like,
Yeah. But I only feel that I like through, I mean, that's something nice I think about publishing online is that like you get such immediate feedback from people. And a lot of people who I think otherwise wouldn't have encountered my work. And so then like the pain book came about because readers were like, oh my God, that's it. Like do more of this, please. And I was like, okay. So it's like I really see that as like my most mutual book in that I feel like readers were a part of the process the whole way along.
yeah, it was written in relationship,
Yeah, yeah,
your
yeah,
body
yeah,
and other bodies, um,
totally.
which is so extraordinary. And I love what you said about so much of what you just said, actually. The bad paragraph being this bedrock. I
Yeah.
think we all have this bad paragraph, right? Like we all have at least one
Yeah,
bad paragraph that is sort of the thing.
yeah.
Um,
It's like a hot coal or something,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And it's essential. It's what makes us weird in all of the best ways too,
Yeah.
right? Like it's if you have hated attention, then you have
Yeah.
likely grown some empathy and some kindness out of it. And
Right.
it's this important thing. And I have been thinking a lot, so we do this work in the military healthcare system,
Right.
and we are rebuilding community. That is the goal of what we do, is creating authentic connection between people who might not have much in common, um, but are given the space to tell the truths about themselves.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about how telling your story is really essential and important and helps you gain control of your narrative. But
Hmm.
I've been thinking more recently about how the hearing of this story for our
Yeah.
coming group, I mean, we have this beautiful group that gathers on Friday, and they've been hearing each other's stories. Um, and that's another experience altogether.
Yeah. Because then you also learn how to tell your own story by hearing other people's too. And, then you see the points of connection and you see templates for how to live your life.
Yes. And those 20 people in the room
Yeah.
had this experience of, remember
Yes.
how, so and so effed us up that day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And then that's the
oh,
bar, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we've all now where we haven't, we're here writing about all of our, how the sort of like separate tributaries of our lives are in this stream for a
Right.
moment. It's like, no, no, no. We're swimming together
Right.
here.
And
This
that's a real experience,
is a
right? Like
real
the shared real
story.
experience of being in someone's story together. Well,
Yes. And I mean, it's something that I've only recently had time to pause and really think about, like, oh, it's like going through something together. This
yes.
is how you build connection with other people.
Yeah.
You endure.
Yeah. And you do that thing, I think, like, which is I love, and the magic of seeing undergrads do this too in the classroom is exactly the things that people are afraid to put on the page are the things that other people are like, this is it. And you can go further into it and we'll be here to like clap with you,
Yeah.
right? Like cheer you on as you do it. It gives me goosebumps just thinking about it because that's the thing, right? Like we're
Right.
with you in this.
Yeah. And it's such an interesting thing because writing is solitary.
Yeah,
And then you're in this space where it becomes like, no, no, we're with you, but also you got to go do that alone. You got to
totally.
go do that in silence.
Right, and I tell them my students too, like, I'm a part of several writing groups, and so I need and get that same thing. Like, it's not like I've figured this out and I am brave and I can just spew sentences now. Like, it's always this little tightrope walk.
It's like that Hair Club for Men commercial from the '80s. It's like, "I'm not only the president, I'm a client." I always think that. I'm just like, "Just so you know, I am also a client here." Like, this is giving my life too.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but yeah, and it is also though, as a facilitator of such a thing, there are these moments where you're like, "Oh, this whole room is shaking, and it is my job to hold it together." Um,
Yeah.
and that's exhausting and
Yes.
scary because no one is like, no one is without mistakes, and no one knows exactly the right
Yeah.
thing to say, and any of that. And what I have found for me is my baseline of being like, just so you know, I don't know anything. And
Right.
like I said, I'm a client, and also I'm gonna do my best,
Right.
but we need to all do
Yeah.
it together. Um, how do you do that with such young people, with undergrads?
It's interesting. I mean, like, I think too, like, when I started teaching, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And so you know, my initial sort of template for teaching was like, okay, I need a lesson plan and I need to stick to it. And here's how we're going to do workshop, and it's like pretty controlled. And I've just sort of like thrown most of that to the wind now because I'm trying to just more say, like, there's the impulse that you have in the midst of a group of people discussing a piece of work that I feel like is really akin to the impulse I have writing, of like, there's usually a little whispers that's like, okay, just intervene very subtly here and point
Mhm.
this one thing out. And then it's amazing sometimes, right? Like how you just say, but this is interesting right here. And you just push it a little bit. And then the whole thing spins and turns in a really good
Yeah,
direction. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
Like
Yeah,
trusting that, like at this point, like I might not know exactly what I'm going to say, but my impulses are coming from a place that is usually helpful. And
yeah.
so just sort of to trust that and to say, I can let go control this conversation, but still like sort of nudge it when people need help, if that makes sense.